Morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy and Mike. Hello, Tommy. How are you doing?
Hello, Mike. Good to see your face.
It's good to be back again. We are just clipping along, moving into our Thursday episode. Um, I feel like the end of this year, Tommy, how we typically go to the end of the year, and it's kind of like a lackluster. Like, there's not a lot of features being made. We're going into the holidays. It. I don't feel like I'm getting that feeling. I still feel like I'm extremely overwhelmed with all the announcements at Ignite and trying to get my head around all the new features that were just kind of landed and released with either within Fabric or this ontology thing. There's a lot of new things coming out the door.
Oh, a ton of things. I mean,
Do you feel the same
one,
way?
Fabric IQ is again what at least what they're putting towards what I've been telling my wife. I'm like, well, they may or may not be completely changing my career again, or kind of like where I'm located. Because she's like, is it just a marketing push by Microsoft, just a different words? I'm like, I don't think so. So like, just if they said the ontology by itself, that would be huge. But we're seeing a ton of stuff. I actually have some great news articles on what we can do with drill through in Excel with direct link data, what we're able to do with, just some amazing things. Also, the transition from all the legacy things. Microsoft just came out with another article about from SSIS to Fabric. So we're seeing all these big things. It's a nice way to end the year.
I will agree with that as well. Let's go through our main topic today. Our main topic is going to just kind of be unpacking what potentially does data governance look like in lieu of Fabric IQ. Maybe Tommy and I are going to react to this a little bit. We've been talking a little bit about this so far. Um, I think there's going to be some interesting topics around, how do we kind of unpack this new world that we're potentially stepping into. So that will be one that will be there as well. Um, with that, let's go into some news items. Tommy, I have a news item here that I think is going to be very impactful or influential here in general with how you build things. I'm very excited. I use a lot of notebooks. I'm a big fan of Python. I'm a big fan of Spark. Using the notebook experience, I've even now have been using more of the T-SQL experience. Do you use the T-SQL notebooks, Tommy?
Um, on and off, but I really just stayed as close as I can to Python and Spark. But
Okay.
I know for a lot of developers, it's pretty huge.
Let me just say it this way. I like using the SQL Analytics endpoint or the data warehouse experience, right? There's tabs, but it feels very traditional SQL to me. It doesn't really feel very modern. So I like this notebook experience because a lot of times when I'm building SQL statements, I'm building like a smaller statement. I'm exploring a single table. I need to build another table. And so a lot of times I'm comparing the output from multiple SQL queries like side by side. And to me, that
Mhm.
feels much more fluid or natural inside the concept of a notebook. I can have multiple steps side by side in the notebooks. Well, the reason I love notebooks here, and because I'm gushing about notebooks here a little bit, I also want to point out here you now can run notebooks in pipelines in a pipeline now using the service principal or the workspace identity. Tommy, this has been a big pain
Yay.
point of mine in general with the Fabric ecosystem. Is Tommy, you go in, you build a pipeline, you build a semantic model, you link some things together, the credentials of you, Tommy, are attached to all the things that you're building. And let's say, Tommy, you win the lottery and you go on to better things, or you decide to move out of the company. Well, now that you have all these like items that have been made by Tommy, if you get removed from the organization or you move on or whatever, your stuff is all broken. Eventually, those credentials will time out. People have to take over them. It's kind of a complex, painful thing. And I think there's a mind shift happening here a little bit is instead of building all these items under your name, you should be building them under the service principal. And I really like this workspace identity. I think the workspace identity is pretty cool. And I'm very excited to see the workspace identity get added to many more places inside Fabric. What are your thoughts, Tommy?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you more about that. Where are some of the most like impactful ways you're seeing the workspace identity really just make a difference for not just you, but obviously for your team?
I think it's when we're able to use the workspace identity to connect to data sources, right? So sometimes you have a data source like a SQL server. There's like a username and a password that you're using to go connect to that. In other situations, you can use a service principal directly to reach out to other items. So the more that I can use the workspace identity to create and manage connections between things, right? That's where I'm finding value. So the like if I can get the semantic model to use the workspace identity to refresh things, if I can get the semantic model to reach into the lakehouse using the workspace identity, these things make a lot more sense to me because then the connection is centrally managed. And to be honest, how I think about a workspace is the workspace is the place where everyone can work and build things together. I don't need individual user credentials tied to the data flow process. Another one that's interesting here, Tommy, is when you go from dev to test to production, like different environments. Well, you
Mhm.
kind of actually do want each workspace to have its own identity or way to access the different datas on the other side of things. And so that's where again I think the workspace identity makes a lot of sense here as well.
Dude, I think we're seeing a lot of that too with the being able to access the data on behalf of not just will you be doing before with the APIs, but with MCPs, with the automation, with the Nginx side or the agent side of this too. Just being able to do that on behalf. Um, yeah, no, I love that. That's a banger to start off with too. And how much too with notebooks are you? Because when I think of APIs in Power BI, I still think of XML Like that's really the most general. If not that, then I'm doing admin. But this really just brings us to I think that pure development role of being able to access the service, being able to not just either run and get my audit data or deal with my semantic model, but we're doing a ton of things now that are, I mean, this is nothing but developer.
It's a definitely a lot more developer, but I think it's a better practice here. Again, I just don't really love the fact that we have to tie everything back to a user credential all the time. It just makes sense. If I'm in a workspace and I have a pipeline, I have a semantic model, and I have a notebook, right? Those things should be able to talk to each other without having to use a user. They should just work inside the context of the workspace. So I'm going to put some documentation here in the chat window. The first one I'm putting here is just in general, what is the workspace identity? The example Microsoft gives here is if you have a Azure Data Lake Gen 2. So this is something that's an Azure resource,
Mhm.
and the Azure resource needs to grant access to something to read those lakehouse tables. So sometimes you're putting data in a lakehouse, sometimes you're putting it in an ADLS Gen 2. The workspace doesn't have to use Tommy's credentials to go access the Azure Data Lake Gen 2 storage. Instead, you would create the workspace identity and use it to go back to reach into um, the Azure Data Lake Gen 2 and get the information. So the credentials can be given directly from the workspace. It's almost like adding a service principal to the workspace and then using
Yeah.
that. This is the same pattern I see happening with people and user accounts. I don't like this idea, but people do it. They'll build a Power BI service account. So it'll be
Oh
like
yeah.
Power BI at mycompanyname.com. And what they do is they use that identity
That
that
log into
way
everything.
to
Yeah.
log into everything. Like that is the user ID. So they're basically making a fake user. And I don't like that because now you have to share passwords. Now you're sharing usernames. And that's a point of weakness. You can't turn on multi-factor authentication there because then I would be having to ping you, Tommy, like, hey, I'm going to log into something. Tommy's like, oh, MFA is turned on. I got to go. It just doesn't work. It's just so clunky. I don't like the experience of it. Does that make sense, Tommy?
Mike, I've seen teams where they had to log into their browser with that
Yep.
user account. I was like, what are we doing here?
Yeah. I think people understand the concept of a service account, but how it's implemented, I don't really love it. Right? That's what the workspace identity is. The workspace identity is the service account that we should be using to get through different elements. So, anyways, okay, enough harping on that one. Tommy, you've got a couple more news items here that are worthy. Let's go with one of yours.
Yeah, so this is going to be one article from Microsoft, but then one from we haven't done an article from in a while from Chris Webb. So
Okay.
drill through in Excel, and just so if you heard me correctly, I did say Excel.
Mm-hmm.
Now is supported for direct lake and direct query models.
Ooh, this is interesting.
So really the limitation before was if you wanted to get details in Excel when you were kind of doing the analyze your data, um, you couldn't do it with a direct link or a direct query. It was only an import semantic model.
Mm-hmm.
Now that barrier is completely broke or finally crossed. and that show details with using our old language MDX, they'd be able to see that additional inputted data. So Power BI supports the drill through, enabling you to double click on your pivot tables and retrieve the underlying data. And it's available just out of the box. No
Mhm.
additional configuration that you need to do.
And it works with row level security and object
Mhm.
level security configuration. So it's still giving the context to the user and passing that through. Um, Tommy, do you use a lot of drill through inside Excel or using that one in your
So
world?
it's not a universal catch on, but I'll put it this way: the teams or people that do use it extensively.
Mm,
So it's more common than it's than you would think. It's not like only 5 people use it, but it's probably maybe out of 100 people, I would say 20 people in my organization would be using it, maybe 15 to 20, but they use it for their work processes. That's part of
sure.
their workflow.
Okay.
And just being able to connect to the data and then work off of it. So
Mhm,
this is really, I think, for those people, especially that were moving that direction anyways.
mhm.
Um, no, this is going to be one of those where people stand up and cheer.
So one thing I'll just note here as well is when Kai is the principal PM on this one, or at least working this feature through, which I'm very excited. Kai's amazing, does a really good job on things. I love his thoroughness on features, and he's a great PM for features and things. One of the things he notes here at the beginning of the article, Tommy, that it says historically, show detail relies on MDX drill through statements. He never really rectifies or resolves that statement. All he says is that now it works with direct query and direct lake. So my question kind of is did something change on the Excel side? Is it not using MDX drill through anymore to do these queries? Or is it now the model has changed and now the model is able to accept MDX drill through queries on direct lake and direct query? When I read this article, I was initially thinking, and I read it 3 times here while you were talking, Tommy, just to make sure I got it in my head. It sounds like the semantic model has been updated to handle the MDX queries that Excel will fire to it, that will then let you drill in and see the details of the table. I was initially thinking that Excel was getting an update so that it's not running MDX queries anymore. Maybe that's true, but the way the article is written, it doesn't indicate to me, like, when you say the word historically,
Yeah.
it makes me sound like that was like a legacy thing, that was something that was previously there, and now it's no longer there. So I may I may put here in the little comments down here in the discuss area at the bottom and say, hey, does this mean that the direct query now are still using MDX, or is this something else that we're gonna are we gonna see a new language? Has Excel been updated to have like DAX language now? So I don't know. I'm not really quite sure. Yeah, the chat is talking here. Yeah, chat, I'm agreeing with you. I kind of would like to see the Excel pivot table generate DAX instead of just MDX, but I mean, that's it is what it is, and that's how it works. So I don't know if we're gonna Excel. I find is a monstrosity of a beast. I don't know how many users are actually inside Excel, Tommy, but I'm guessing we're north of 1 billion users using Excel daily or monthly.
I'm doing a training next month for Excel, and
Yep,
I my only request was, can we, with the client, I'm like, can I do a scoping to understand what they're trying to do with Excel? Because there's a very
that's a
good
good
chance.
idea. Great idea
Yeah.
because it's very
So
you can do a
yeah,
lot of things with Excel.
and a lot of times too, they go, oh, well, we have all this data that we're trying to go around. Like,
Yep.
well, do I have a thing for you?
Yeah. I have a new tool. Um,
Yeah, you may.
so I'm also doing some training here recently, Tommy, and one of my big stories here is I love the fact that Excel has Power Query and Power BI has Power Query. Those 2 items are amazing. And the fact that those exist in both places, I heavily emphasize automate, automate, automate. And I'm shocked, Tommy, the number of people. I mean, Excel Power Query has been built into the product for a long time now,
Yeah,
like since 2017, 2016, somewhere in there. I don't even remember. It's been so
Excel
long
and
ago.
Power Query. Oh, you mean like without it being a plugin?
Without it being a plugin, I
Yeah,
don't
I
know
was
if
like,
to
it's
add it.
kind of
It's
it
built
was
into the tool,
duplicate. Yeah.
but you had to make the add-in before. So the fact that this has been around so long and I have and people are still downloading data from the internet in CSV form, copying it out and putting it in their Excel file to reformat it is just beyond me. I'm like, Microsoft needs to do a better job of educating here. Like, this is something that Microsoft should be. highlighting in the tool, look at this Power Query thing. It's amazing. You need to start using it in everything. And I even do a demo where I build some Power Query inside Excel, load some tables, and then I do a one button import directly to Power BI because you can directly transfer the
Yeah.
Power Query language right into Power BI stuff. So, like, if you start, so my argument is no matter what you're doing, you better learn Excel and you better learn Power Query because that's the strongest tool that you're going to get your hands on that can do data engineering. You do not want to manipulate data inside Power BI or sorry, inside Excel. You want to manipulate it in Power Query first, then get it into tables, Excel, other places.
We always bring up Excel, and I remember at my first company, worked heavily with the sales team, and the amount of
Yes.
Excel files that were referenced with formulas, with business logic, and just to try to go through this, Mike, people were not just doing some functions. I mean, these were very smart people with a very terrible organization skills, or there's really nothing else you can do, but it's amazing. So to this day, Mike, there are organizations out there who make money, who still make money despite of it, who are relying on ridiculous functions and on certain cells and certain references just to get by.
Mhm. Mhm. Yes, I totally agree with that one. Chat is getting quite interesting here, Tommy. Someone, Millhouse is saying, I wish I had an Excel table that would use the combo filters and query fold back in Power BI. Tommy, I'm going to tell you right here, this is my dream right now in Power BI.
Okay. Don't say the same thing we've said every so many times.
I probably am going to say
I
something
know
again
what
you've
you're
already
going to
heard.
say.
The tape there needs to be a slicer table visual. There just has to be. Like, to me, there's just no reason why this doesn't exist. Why can't I put a table into Power BI and have it function the same way as a slicer
There it is.
where there it is, right? So why can't it function the same way? I have a table with columns and data in them, and I apply filters directly to the columns. The table gets shorter, just like it does in Excel with a table. Those should also be applied back to the rest of the model there as well. So, anyways,
You know what? Also, I also want when I scroll through that table to make it feel like it was Excel too. Why can't they do that? That was another thing we brought up
yep.
probably 3 years ago too.
I don't know when they're ever going to get to it. We really definitely need some like big improvements around the Excel file, like Excel like tables experiences. If you just brought that experience over to Power BI, I think you'd make a lot of people really, really happy
Mhm.
inside the Power BI space,
But Mike, don't worry because they Microsoft's been working hard and they just updated the image visual in Power BI.
which has
So
been, I've
now
also found that to be quite interesting, Tommy. Have you used the new card visual? Like it's now updated and
it's the default.
well, I've also observed that in older reports, when you were using the old card, it doesn't highlight it anymore. Like, so, it's let's say you have an old report with an old
Mhm.
card and it's not there. Like, it
Yeah.
doesn't exist.
You mean
Like,
in
you can't
the
find it.
pen? Yeah.
No, in the pane. The pane does
That's
not
what I'm
have it.
saying.
Yeah,
That's what I'm saying.
and you click on the visual, you're like,
That
"What's
just happened to
selected?"
me.
Yeah, and I was like, "This is weird that it's the old visual, but they're not showing you that it's there." And then you have to go click the ellipsis and say, "Show all visuals," and then it shows up. So it just feels like if I select an old visual that was there and you're no longer showing it in the filter pane, we need something to like indicate like, "Hey, this is the older version. Would you like to
Yeah.
update to the new version?"
Yeah.
I would have at least expected like a message box on the old visual. So the transition from the old visual to the new visual was really kind of caught me off guard there a little bit.
They did that with the Azure Maps visual. You gotta enable this or upgrade that. But you know what I bet it is, Mike? That card visual is so ingrained in probably so many reports.
Oh,
Like, you know what I
100%,
mean?
Tommy.
Like
It's everywhere.
this is not a feature. This is, this is like changing the plumbing.
It's a
Or
bug by design.
yeah, yeah, yeah. If that has to be the most popular visual, and if Power BI to look at their every report
Metrics.
ever created,
Yeah, I don't know, Tommy. That would be hard. I mean, I think that's probably a very high visual. I think the other visual that's extremely used would be slicers. I think
no, and no way.
yeah, I would argue I'd probably argue is like slicers. It'd be nice if we could get someone to tell us like what was the most used visuals, but I think tables and I think tables and slicers are high up on the list, in my opinion.
You know, I've obviously would regretfully agree with you on the table one, but for whatever reason, I don't think it's going to be as high as you think. I know every report has them, but the volume of visuals, you really think that real estate people are still
Well,
putting just slicers everywhere?
okay, here we're gonna have a hot debate here real quick. All right, let's think about in the early days, Tommy, when we were building things. Well, let's even with the filter pane. The filter pane exists. I don't think a lot of people like it. I don't think a lot of people use it. I think it's a kind of an underused feature. The filter pane, I think, is extremely powerful. I like it. I think it's really good. I like using the filter pane for a lot of filtering options. Not many people agree with me on that stance. However, think about this, Tommy. Whenever you build a report, which visual is the one visual you're going to at least put two, maybe three of them on the same page? And it's usually going to be the slicer. You may put a bar chart on there, you may put a pie chart, you donut chart, whatever. Don't love it, but you might do it. And then you put a table, right?
Mhm.
So these are you'll
Shoot.
have one or two of the other visuals on the page, but I can't tell you how many reports I've built where there's been like 3, 4, 5 slicers on the page just to filter multiple columns, a date filter, a category filter, a region filter. Like those are always on every page. And every time I go into like
Yeah.
companies that are newer to Power BI, the first thing they're trying to do is how can we get all these slicers on the page? Where do we put them? What's the design of the page look like so all the slicers can get there? So I'm pretty confident like the slicer is high on the list.
Now that you're saying that, I'm thinking about all my reports.
Yes. Go back to
You
your
know,
early days.
no, I mean today too. Like, they're not as loud as they were, but they're still
Mhm.
there.
Mhm.
So I think that's the difference between a seasoned Power BI Pro and a new one is how many slicers do you have on a given page.
Yes.
So
Yep.
especially those who are coming from Excel, they want to be able to edit everything. It's funny you say that with the filter pane too, because I really try to use it, but it's
I
kind
use it all
of
the time now. It's
yeah,
my go-to for everything I do for
the
filtering.
filter pane.
Yeah, I mean, I like to think of like the report as like an interactive thing. So if I need a slicer or I need to feed something to slice by, I put a visual on the page that allows me to slice. So if I want to slice by a certain thing, to me that indicates like this needs to be like a bar chart or some kind of
Mhm.
element on the page that I can click with my button, my
Yeah,
finger, because I also feel like especially when we're talking let me speak personally about my business, right? My business, I do a lot of moving around and I travel and I speak and things. And so sometimes I need to go see the Power BI app. I use the Power BI app a lot on my phone, believe it or not. And so by having the app on my phone, I can easily click on data bars directly in the app. And there's nice, it's graphical. Like I can click on the bar and it filters the data down. So a lot of things that I'm doing filtering wise is I'm using the report itself to filter what I want. So I feel like the natural interaction of the report is a slicer by default. So I try and think of slicers in the way of what visuals can I put in place that are easy to click on that will then give me the same interactions as a slicer. And then anything else I want, I put on the filter pane. Like years, dates, people, all the other things that we need to put on the side, that's almost always relinquished to the filter pane because I get so much more control. I can do pick list, I can do search by text, I can starts with, contains, all these other different filter options, and I don't have to rebuild the report just to get those functionalities to work. I do agree with you, Tommy. Like the filter pane could probably use some additional love. It could always get better. I think there's experiences there we can make much better for users. I'd also like the filter pane to be able to be on the left or the right. Right now, you can only get the filter pane to be on the
this
right
is
side of the
true.
report. That's all you can do. So I feel like the filter pane itself needs some additional featured options so that when you're publishing reports, you could actually make that move between left and right sides of the report as well. Again, maybe even top or bottom. I mean, I think you should be able to place the filter pane wherever you want on the page, and it should just work no matter what. But anyways, I like it. I think it's a good feature.
This is great. All right, so let's go to the last article that I have, and I'm going to give a shout out here to Mr. Christopher Webb. And what we are dealing with is stopping Power BI report or stopping Power BI Copilot from answering questions from report visuals. So
This
what
is
the heck is
interesting. Yeah, what's this all about, Tommy?
so when you ask a data question in Power BI Copilot, the first thing it's going to try to do is answer a question using an existing report visual. So you ask a general question, it's going to basically go, Okay, let me see what visuals are there, and we'll just reference that. If no
Mhm.
answer is found, then it will generate an actual DAX query or create a new visual. So the report visual is obviously the most reliable way to get a correct answer, but depending on the measures and the filters, visuals can produce misleading or very incorrect results. And you can see this how you tested it. Um, so that's where the AI instructions come in to control how Copilot answers questions, because there's still Microsoft hasn't given a ton of examples and like different scenarios for the instructions in a semantic model. And this is a great one where with your instructions, you say ignore visuals for any time a specific measure is referenced by the user. Ignore all the visuals on the report page. Instead, always generate new visuals. So, which is pretty cool that you can get to that level of detail with the instructions, and it will, in a sense, respond and abide by that.
Yeah, so this is basically changing the prompting that's being used for Copilot. It sounds like this was a blog post that came from Chris Webb, but Cecilia Bayless was the one who kind of came up with this kind of notice here, and it feels to me, based on what Chris was writing here, is there are visuals on the page that the AI is aware of, the Copilot is aware of, and it kind of favors, if you're already asking information about what it sees on the current visuals on the page, it's going to read that information and just put it back as text. So you'll note here, and Chris highlights here, there's a little annotation that comes with the responses. Number one, saying, "Hey, this is where this is the reference point, right? So here's how we reference this information to get you the answer here." And by using this prompt, if a user asks a question about the average price paid measure, ignore all visuals on the report and do not use them to answer this question, as they may give a misleading answer. Instead, always generate a new visual to answer this kind of question. So, having that prompt forces the AI to not use the visual layer and go directly to the semantic model. And then it uses the semantic model. And then what he shows you then is, look, when you use that and you ask the same question, it now produces an actual data card and recalculates something for you automatically. So, interesting concept here. But Tommy, this is the kind of stuff like how my problem with this is, how do we ever, like, how do you figure this out? Unless I was in like
Mhm. In
unless
the
I'm
weeds.
right? Unless I'm listening to the Explicit Measures podcast, unless I'm doing work with like this particular feature, when are we going to figure this out? And so my complaint here a little bit is a lot of this Copilot stuff is you have to experiment with it. You have to write queries against the model and see what comes out. Where's the education on this? Where are people like this is I don't know how to say this a different way, Tommy. What I'm trying to say is it's hard to understand a non-deterministic solution of what it's popping out. What is the information? I don't understand it. Does that make
This is
sense what I'm
this
describing?
is no. So here's the funny thing that I wish Microsoft did a better job was whenever they introduce a new, not just tool, but a new, in a sense, concept. Um, a lot of the AI teams, I think they have people just dedicated to, unless AI is doing it for them. I don't know, but they have teams that are dedicated to building out, like in a sense, scenarios, sandboxes, and like basically this guidelines.
I don't know,
So,
Tommy. I'm
well,
not
honestly, you take a look at everything like Claude Code is doing, and it's, hey, we have this new thing called Claude Skills. Never heard of it, or never knew why you need it. Okay, here's all these community, GitHub cookbooks that we've developed on reasons why you'd want to use it. GitHub has now agents that you can actually connect to your repo in and have instructions that can do different things.
I mean, I do use
Never heard
that.
it? Yeah,
We
but
actually use that in our company. We
yeah,
direct we directly
so
use Copilot to do reviews on code, and it's getting really good at reviewing people's code. Hey, I see that you made this function twice, and it's repeating. You should probably turn this into a function as opposed to having the code, the business logic
mhm.
being repeated in multiple areas. So that I get, Tommy, but saying that you're going to hire someone, I mean, there definitely is some level of
Oh,
like QA and QA testing. I feel
it's
like the
not.
more efficient way of getting to this answer is building a test bed,
No,
right?
it's not
So
testing here, Mike. This is the marketing of it to get it out so people can start using it. That's what I'm saying. It's not this. The We're building things, community open source resources you can start downloading and using, and we need to give a ton of different scenarios for anyone who's interested in this. Go, oh, you can use this to make a PDF. You can do this to do a presentation. Here's all the ways you can utilize this tool that you have no idea what to do with or where to start. And most of these AI companies, especially because they're introducing not just like a new car that you know how to drive, it's like, well, do I sit in that car? How fast can I go in that car? These are people who are dedicated to basically understanding like all the different main cases, who's like their personas, and getting started with it. So people go, oh, I didn't know you could do that. And I think this is the hardest thing of our industry right now. It's amazing what Claude Code is doing, what Google's even doing too. Go look at any of the cookbooks on GitHub. It's ridiculous. But for us, with the freaking AI and Fabric IQ, here's Copilot or instructions for a semantic model, and not sure what it outputs. Not sure the value. I just know it's a giant text box.
But this is my point though. You're talking about like a car and how to drive it. That's all deterministic. If I press this gas pedal, this is how fast I'll go. All that can be learned, and the inputs produce a very consistent response. What I'm struggling with here is how would I even know to do this article from Chris Webb without reading the article from Chris Webb and discovering like I made a prompt, it went
Yeah,
against the model, and the model returned something I wasn't expecting. So you have to be able to identify. So my problem here is because these things are very like specific. Every report the AI is going to go against is going to be different for every company.
100%.
So how where is the collective knowledge being gathered
Exists.
around what kind of prompts or what kind of instructions
What's
should I
the
be sending into the
best
AI
practices, the
agent?
guidelines?
What are those things? What are the prompting things I need to send to the agent so that I get a good or consistent result
Right.
out? And also, how am I getting feedback from users using my agent of like, hey, this thing returned a value. If it returns, so for example, in Chris's article, it talks specifically about something coming back incorrectly. Like that scares people, especially in the BI space. If you're going to make decisions on something, what did he say here in the note here? He said, oh yeah, in the prompt itself, right? If a user asks a question, it says, um, do not use the visual because it may give a misleading answer. And I'm looking at that going, that's scary to me because that's letting people prompt it and it's not getting to the right answers that are in the report. And if it comes back misleading and people are making head count decisions based on a misleading answer that was prompted back through Copilot, oh my word, Tommy, heads are going to roll.
Mhm.
So this is where I'm very interested in. Like again, I just don't know where we learn all this stuff. Like this is a lot to me. This feels a lot of like experimentation. Everyone's trying to figure it out. We're all trying to learn together how to get this AI to work better with our reporting, and to have things that come out like this just make me extremely nervous. I'm not a big fan.
Yeah. So here, I'm going to send you an article, just for reference, but this is what Microsoft should be doing, especially with things like this giant Copilot instructions. It's like rather than just write what you want it to do, this is just the blog, which is ridiculously huge. It goes through, hey, what is it? How do you get started with it? And then what are some of the techniques you can do, right? Where, oh, by the way, if you say this, it's going to listen, and there's all those kind of hidden little terminologies that you can do.
I mean, this is a
um
good place to start with some of this, but
yes,
again,
but we don't even have that.
you don't even get to see these things. You don't even get to see, like you don't know these things exist until an error happens, and that's mainly my complaint here is
Sure, yeah.
because it's so kind of easy to get. I mean, that's the advantage of it. It's also the disadvantage of it, right? The one reason why you like AI on top of things is it's very creative, right? It can interpret your question and interpret data and summarize both of them and get to an answer that it thinks is the best answer. That's really helpful. That's also its biggest downside is you may ask a question of it and you're trusting the answers that's being provided unless you actually take a critical mind and go in a little bit and say, okay, This is the answer it's giving me. Does this make sense? Did the AI agent provide proof that this is what we're actually talking about? Then I can have confidence in the answer. So this is the part where I'm a little bit leery about this, and this is why I like using AI agents with code more, is because
Mhm.
you can test it right away, right? If I'm just asking an agent to write Python for me, it may not write the correct Python or the most efficient Python. But as soon as it writes the Python, I can go to my notebook, I can run the code and see if it works. If it works, then it's right. If it doesn't work, it's not right. Now, it may give me mixed results that come back. I can evaluate those as well. But like to me, that feels much more testing the answers that are being provided from the AI versus when you're looking at reporting, I'm asking it a question. I don't have any way of, there's no method for me to test that answer. Does that make sense?
No,
It's the testing part
yeah,
that gets me.
that's what, to go back to my initial statement, I guarantee you these organizations on the forefront of technology have teams devoted to literally, like, people who tested video games. They are just, all they're doing is trying things out, and then they generate this nice little blog article. Claude didn't know this until they went through it too, but they have people who are dedicated to literally trying to figure this out and find those bugs, find the weird hallucinations. Yeah, but for you and I, Mike, we don't have that.
Yeah.
This is the same thing that happened with you when UDFs came out. You remember there's that one like weird GitHub page on Markdown that didn't really explain much about the different user defined functions you can have. Like, it was pretty bad. It was a more code than it was a documentation. But for these new
I
features
do
that
not
come
remember
out
that.
for transanalytical workflows, I'll send it to you. Right? There should be a ton of different examples, and not just a GIF moving around the screen of, Jim, it's going to be doing this, and all the ways that you can implement it so you can get started and know why you're going to put the time in. Anyways, I think I'm beating a dead horse there.
Yeah, I'm not sure where you're going with this one, but okay.
Oh, what I'm trying to say is we are on the forefront
You
of
don't
new
have to keep
concept.
going. I don't understand where you're
I
going. We could just move on too.
all right, let's
I don't
move
need you to
on.
explain it
It
again.
gets me frustrated.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so let's move off of our main news items here. So those are some good news items around those topics. Let's jump into our main topic today. We're gonna use an article from Microsoft. Let's unpack a little bit more around what the Fabric IQ is. We've talked a little bit around this new released feature from Microsoft Ignite. Let's unpack this, Tommy. What do you think here? How should we frame this conversation with this article here? Introducing Fabric IQ for the enterprise.
And yeah, we are really going to be breaking this down as well when it comes to from the governance side. We did introduce this I think last week, just this new introduction of Fabric ontology, and now we have what is Fabric IQ, which is really a foundation of your soft and hard data, how the organization speaks, um, conceptualizes, and really brings all their information together, and really geared towards the new AI world that we're actually running into. It's all of our data, not just my data in SQL, but all of those PDFs, all those things that the teams work on, all the information that an organization gets their hands on, is has a single kind of estate in place for us to not just connect or uh, interact with it, but also to make sense of it and how it relates to everything else in the organization.
I
So
think I think this
yeah.
is a precursor. So let me give it a bit more context here. So we're talking about let's just step back and not talk Fabric IQ. Let's just talk about the data that exists in your organization and where that data exists. I think that's
Mhm.
kind of a good place to kind of communicate here about what Fabric IQ is trying to accomplish. I guess this is my understanding of initial runs with the program and what's happening here in Fabric. So when you look at the blog post, there's another blog post here talking about um, from data platform to intelligent platform, introducing the Microsoft Fabric IQ. This was on November 18th. That was kind of announced. And the idea here is data needs to become understanding. And then they're kind of shifting this idea of being Microsoft Fabric IQ is semantic intelligence platforming. So it takes all of your semantic models, the relationships between your data tables. This is called an
Mhm.
ontology. It's talking about AI Foundry, Microsoft 365 Copilot, databases, real-time intelligence, graph databases, data agents, like all the things that are required
Right.
that Microsoft's pulling all these tools together. What is the unifying methodology, or, you know, why do we care about pulling all these things together? And I think this is where they're trying to come out with this idea of, you need to have the raw data, but then you also need to have relationships in the data. You also need to be able to define master data in your organization. And I think that's where this idea of a um, intelligence platform is coming from. So that's kind
And
of
I,
my
yeah,
framework there. What do you think,
and
Tommy?
this is much different too. When you initially say that, I have haunting memories of Purview and things like that,
Yeah, I
where like,
do.
yeah, but the difference here is, again, it's not just being able to, in a sense, view my data and see where it is, but that next really human level of a shared uh, definition, the lineage, and really what goes into those pieces of information, how they relate to one another, how they act on one another in a really new, different type of semantic foundation that we have not seen before. Obviously, we're still using something that looks very similar to our semantic model, but I think our example that we gave last week was, if I've been looking at 2D paintings, Microsoft has just introduced a new painting that's just simply 3D. So we're adding another dimension to kind of what we're already doing. And again, the key benefits, why is Microsoft doing this? Well, we are moving into a world of AI. We've quoted this before. 90% of organizations right now who are trying to adopt AI are failing. Um, and there's a lot of reasons for that. One of them is, again, okay, what's the universal way that we're going to make sense of all the information that we have? And again, to your point, Mike, it's not just my data that's coming from a SQL database and this
Yes.
other data source. It's, yeah.
I want to expand on that. Like, so I think this concept of like the ontology is, Tommy, we work in multiple places. We have files stored in place. We have files stored in SharePoint. We have PDFs. We have slide decks. There's a lot more information that's at our fingertips in our organization that we're creating. We're generating this data and putting it somewhere. So when I look at this experience here and what they're trying to do here, I think there's this concept of, okay, a lot of the language here, they're talking about unifying the platform, bringing everything together. And
Mhm.
so this is where I want to kind of unpack the governance part of this a little bit, which is, how do we get through this concept of governance? Like, what is this going to look like? And I think, because this is new and we haven't figured out how to use this ontology piece yet, I think we're going to have to start small. I think we're going to have to start in like a team, a department, something a bit more specific, and then figure out what works for our business and then grow it from there. But, as soon as you start talking data governance, there's this whole idea of who owns it? Who owns the master data? If there's information that's incorrect that's being brought into this knowledge base, what happens when something's not properly described? It's not fully fleshed out. The Excel document has wrong errors and formulas and issues inside it. Whose responsibility is it to correct that information? I think there's maybe potentially a false mindset here a little bit, Tommy, that when you read these articles, it feels like, oh yeah, all this makes sense. Pull all of our data organization together. But we're also assuming that the data is 100% right and correct and ready to go and cleaned up and ready to be used by AI. I don't really get this feeling of like, well, how do I some data needs to be brought to this central Fabric IQ piece, but at some point you're going to find bad data or stuff that's not right or things that shouldn't be included. How do
Mhm.
you how are we going to be able to kick data out of that as well? So that I feel like there's the data governance piece here comes with some additional considerations around who needs to manage it, who is the authority of whether something is correct or not correct. We're going to need to have more organizational conversations around, if we're bringing data to the ontology, I think we're going to need to have a data owner for everything. A data steward for every single piece of data we're bringing in here has to be established before you bring it into the ontology. What are your thoughts on that?
It's funny that you say that too, because in the blog article that we're referencing, at the end of it, it says, "Hey, check out the release plan for Fabric IQ, which
Mhm.
obviously is one of those most exciting ones.
Sure.
Well, it turns out that's the Fabric roadmap, just filtered on administration, governance, and security. So kind of hilarious there. That perfect segue there. It's
Yeah.
literally, yeah, it's not like a separate Fabric IQ roadmap. It's just the same one. So obviously, we're on the same page with Microsoft as always. And and Mike, yeah, again, this is something where, without getting too ahead of ourselves, we are now introducing again to the organization where we've already tried to hammer home, hey, can I get these definitions from you? In order for AI to really have an effect and be, an effective part of an organization, it has to have a shared sense of what something means here is the same thing it means here. And this starts with our governance, and it starts with our just making sure that everyone can be more than just on the same page, but that information is where it needs should be. So the problem right now with, if you look at the AI world, and it's not even just for enterprise, is the lack of unified language. For example, we just talked about the Copilot instructions, right? Well, those instructions are different for Copilot than it is for another AI tool in terms of the format, the structure, where you have to feed it. So we're dealing in a world where there's not a lot of, in a sense, structure, best practices already out there. This next level is we're doing this with a business, or each business with their soft data. Mike, we're bringing in now all of the concepts that they share, to your point, not just the PowerPoints, but the POs, the things that really never touched our department in the past. Maybe we try to extract some of it,
I'm gonna
but
maybe slightly maybe not disagree with you here, but maybe I'm
yeah.
gonna also like I don't think all of our data needs to be part of this. Like you keep saying the word all and all our data and everything's here.
Mm,
I don't think
okay.
I don't think that's a fair statement, honestly. I think we're gonna have to be selective as to what we bring into this ontology space
Mm,
and not bring and it's not this assumption of like we're gonna absorb everything. I think that's a naive statement around bringing like that's not
well,
the assumption here. I think what we're going to have to focus on is very narrowed things that are useful to the
okay.
organization and hyper focusing on building solutions around key areas here. So like I guess maybe another example, another way of saying this is a lot of the example Microsoft gives here is like airplanes, airport hubs. Like there's very specific inputs and actions that need to come out of the
Yeah.
data. So I think you don't want to come into this ontology space or this data governance space and just start throwing things at the wall. It's not like, hey, here's a bunch of things. We're just going to throw it out. It's a magic fix here.
Yeah.
I think there's a
Well,
whole
maybe what you
strategy that we're going to need to like sit back and think about is okay, what are the at the end of the day, what are the key actions I need to take? I should ask another question around what is the speed of those actions from when the data occurs? How fast do I need to action and make decisions about things? Some things can be moved quickly, like again, like go back to Microsoft's example. In the airline industry, we can quickly move people around from planes, gates. Like that's a fast moving data space, and you need to have that information quickly. But in other areas, like if you're looking at like your sales pipeline, in a day, you're probably not going to be able to make shifts and changes on the sales pipeline in a day. You're going to need some days or some weeks to kind of get through that information and allocate new people or hire new sales representatives. Some of those changes are much slower, but you need to be identified as at the right time to make sure you can make the right decisions around those customer based informations. So this is where I think the data governance is going to become increasingly important here, especially in the ontology. I don't. Again, I haven't seen it in the ontology yet today, but there's no concept of that I see around bringing things to the ontology and then applying data
mm,
owners or data stewards to all this as well. There's going to have to be a better cataloging experience, and I think as teams unpack, does this feature make sense to them? We're going to need a concerted effort to identify where when data comes into ontology, who are all the people that need to agree upon this is the right data to bring into this. Um, Sitting back and thinking through these are the actions I'm expecting to take using this ontology, right? Because again,
Mm.
back to our point, what we said a lot of time before, Tommy, with reports. If the report isn't making money or saving money, why are we doing it? So just to throw down an ontology in hopes that the agents can use it, I think is a bad way to build a system.
So I don't want to get off track, but you kind of bringing up a great point here in terms of how to we're going to approach this, because right now, and just for my own state of mind, right now the goal of an ontology model or the ontology artifact in Fabric is really to use it with a data agent, right?
Correct.
Or what? And
Well,
that's
yes, maybe. I don't
is there
know.
any? Yeah, and is that the only kind of output? So let's say you have your ontology built. Well, what can you do with it? If we have all these shared definitions, and we've raised all the entities, and they have meaning now, and all those things. Well, when I finish that, so to speak, the kind of is that just for an agent, like either the operational agent or the data agent right now? Because you can't really do anything else with it.
I mean, they're talking about action-based things, so if you look at,
Yeah,
like, the
sure,
ontology
sure.
piece, and then they're talking
So
about something happens, and so part of the ontology piece is alerting based on data
right,
coming into this ontology, right? I have streaming data coming in, we have certain thresholds that we're trying to meet. If we don't meet a certain threshold, go send someone a message on Teams, right? Or go do something, right? So this idea of, like, actioning on top of your data is a message that I'm hearing they're saying throughout this Fabric IQ. Now, to your point also, Tommy, right? This idea of linking different semantic models, PDFs, instructions, business, product information, not all of this exists in nice, clean, structured tables. Is also part of this, right? So
right.
having an AI agent understand these are our products and here's the PDFs or the marketing information about those items, the agent is then able to traverse this ontology and say, "Oh, you're asking questions about product details. I can go research what product it is and go pull documents to make the AI support those in whatever it's doing." So I think the idea here is you're trying to your point, Tommy, right? Part of this is letting the agents have more information. But again, we're back to our same question we were talking about with the Chris Webb article. How do I have to write really clear descriptions of things? How much of um, pre-training prompting am I got to provide to this
Yeah.
just to make sure that it doesn't give out weird answers, right? So along those lines,
Yeah, and I just sent you a link, and I'll make sure that's in the episode description. But
I got to
really,
get in the
when
chat window.
yeah, I'll get into the chat window. When we're thinking about ontology, at least, is which kind of the foundation of Fabric IQ is. This also helps us when, from our governance point of view, on where we're actually going to attack first, right? In terms of, hey, organization, everything we have to do, we need to start defining it. Well, we're going to start with who's in the biggest need of action. To your point, probably plane, probably sales, and then try to tackle it from there. They're doing their tables again, their table of choices, Microsoft is. And it's interesting that they're taking ontology and basically putting it as a level with what a semantic model is. So basically, what we're looking at here is when you're choosing the right tool for a scenario of, in a sense, getting your head around information. Microsoft is proposing the ontology artifact, graph in Microsoft Fabric, a Power BI semantic model, and they all have a different use case for depending on what you're trying to do. I'm intrigued that they're finding them all, in a sense, on the same playing field here, but it kind of makes sense. And I think for us, when we're going to say one, we're not just going to do ontology because everyone's asking. It's who. Okay, let me ask you this: when it comes to everyone clamoring for, let's say, everyone wants Fabric IQ. They love it. They love the idea of it. They just want AI to work for them. From the governance, I think is also choosing that team first. You mentioned that we probably have to start small. Well, what are going to be your kind of prerequisites or the things that are going to be considered for an organization to dedicate the resources for a particular department or team?
Well, I think your statement there is a little bit backwards in how I would view it. What the business is asking for, I would say the business is asking for, we want to use AI. We want to put agentic things on top
Right.
of our data. That's what they're asking for. We're being the everyone is saying, I'm looking at all my Twitter feeds and all my LinkedIn messages, and I can see people building entire apps. This is literally inundated with my feeds now. I must be watching too many of these little short videos of people like, look at me, I created an app in 16 hours that now creates $10,000 of revenue each month. Like I'm like thinking to myself, this is not real. This is a bunch of lies. I don't know what you're talking about here. That there's no way that real people are actually doing this. This is like the most curated experiences of
Mhm.
very small people. So I don't think that's real. Um, Maybe it's happening, but it's happening in such small doses. It's not really occurring. So when I look at this AI space and what's going on, I think people are trying to say, look, we see all these things on social media, therefore we think we must use it.
Mhm.
Microsoft, what's your answer to all this agentic stuff? I can use these different products. I can see these different tools. There's all these node based development systems. Microsoft, what's your response to this? And I think this is Microsoft also saying they're trying to figure out their way with agentic things as well. And we're in this space of everything's going to be evolving very quickly. And so, because the agentic space or AI space is moving so quickly here, I think we're going to have a hard time adopting ontologies or this fabric
Mhm.
IQ space because what it looks like today will probably look totally different in 6 months from now because of new technology, more efficient ways of doing things. Again, this is all kind of like a discovery mode. We're all learning this together, figuring out what's the best place to put AI. So I think that's what people are clamoring for. The business is clamoring for, I see so much AI, we need to use it. How we use it or what's adding value in using I think is still to be determined. We're
Mhm.
still trying to figure that part out. I've had some conversations with my engineers. The AI agents are really good when I build the software, but sometimes they get stuck and they can't solve a problem. And the amount of time we're wasting writing a more detailed prompt to
Mhm.
explain to the AI to
It
fix
takes
something would have been just faster if I just went to where the problem was and looked at the code or whatever it generated itself and just go fix it. So while there are certain aspects of AI things that are making it very easy for me to generate things, like my Python function or some
Sure,
specific
sure.
things, that makes sense. There are other situations where I'm spending more time prompting than actually getting the work done.
And
So
waiting.
and waiting, right? So there's this balancing act of like what's going on here. So I think ontology and this idea of relating more information together is to give agents a better chance to provide better information back to users. And we're not there yet, and we don't have good patterns yet, and it's still very to be
That
determined.
and I think that's the magic word there too, because I know exactly what your developers are feeling, and that goes back though too with the space that we're going into doesn't have a universal way of, in a sense, organizing information, right? Like, we don't kind of have the patterns yet where, hey, like everyone, if you are going to build a SQL database for a company, there are books, there's the best practice guide, to make sure that things to optimize it for the organization of it. And right now we're looking at AI, like just feed a web article at it and it'll kind of read it. Trump works for that one off, but when you're doing this for an organization, there has to be, in a sense, that that shelf of information that's organized correctly, so an agent can go, oh, someone's asking and needing something here. I'll go into drawer two, get the required context, yada yada, then act on that. Which every like every app or every tool is trying to do their own way of it, but Microsoft's really realizing like that's not going to work for each unique organization. So can we create, in a sense, that's really what this is, kind of that unified shelf of best practices that every, everyone can speak to. And I would agree with you. The more we go through this, is will this be the final solution here? Well, there's got to be some use cases, and we'll go back to what I said. They've got to show this is more than just for a data agent that I can talk to. And we're like, I see what they're trying to do to build the foundation, but if they actually want to see organizations trying to do this, because we haven't even talked, Mike, about the human side of this, the governance around getting people's process around the definitions and everything like that. And i- if you're not even there, Microsoft, just understand what are the use cases so people can start actually looking at this and adopting. So
Yeah,
I
I'm not really
I
sure.
did not land that plane, by the way, at
Yeah, I'm having
all.
a hard
So
time following what you're saying there.
yeah.
I
So
think there's just a lot more coming. I think the ontology and the data governance piece is very new to the space. I think what it's trying to accomplish here, so from a data governance, I really think in this space, we need to start small. We need to start with small use cases that are very action based.
yeah,
Focus on building ontologies and very specific use cases around what this is going to look like. And then be very careful as an organization, as you're bringing knowledge to this ontology. I think you're going to need to have data owners. And that way you have at least a conversation around who needs to own the information and who needs to be able to push that information into um, or if there's an issue, like there needs to be a ticketing system to some degree, right? When this thing is wrong or when we're getting some
right.
weird results, someone needs to be able to ask a question: Is this really right? Does this really produce what we want? And then we can go back, and what's going to have to happen is there's going to be some level of testing, figuring things out to get down to what is the root cause of the error. And maybe there'll be an agent to help us with that. I don't know. Maybe there's
Yeah.
something that we'll be able to build an
So
agent to help us comb through the ontology and figure out if there's weaknesses or problems or issues in it that we can fix. But there's this expectation of what people want to do, and I think if you're trying to remove, there's something healthy in the process of learning, working with your data to get to an answer, right? It helps the user have confidence that they've done the right steps to get to an answer. If you take all that away and just have people blindly trust the I think you're going to run into problems.
100%. And I would like to apologize to you and everyone else. I think I just had the longest brain fart in my previous statement.
Well,
I know.
just
So
focus on your
well,
idea.
I know
Focus on your
I had
idea.
a few ideas and I wrote it down like, oh, this is going to be a great way to land it. However, the
Land one idea at a
scribbled,
time. It's
no,
a lot easier for me to
they
follow.
kind of all got scribbled into one. So I want to apologize. That has not happened in a long time. But I think, yeah, Mike, I'm just gonna ditto what you said here. When you look at where should you start, if I'm listening to the podcast, hopefully still, and you're like, okay, I'm a director of BI, I'm a data analyst, whatever you're doing is like, let me try this out. Where do you start? um, Start with the most blatant use case of where you can see an agent helping you out, because that is the outcome right now. That may not be what ontology is down the road, but just start with something like, wow, if I had something where we could get our POs done just by asking a question, it would pull all that other data that information I don't have. That's where we start. And that can be a great pilot too, where it can be something that's easily solved, or at least one of the biggest big ticket items. All right. So, Mike, we have a lot more to talk about with ontology, but I think we have beat this down.
I think we've got a good starting point here. I don't really understand where governance is going to sit yet in ontology. Who
Yeah,
owns what things? Who can add? Who can't
that's
add? You know, my biggest concern here with the ontology and governance piece is what happens when something goes awry. What happens when we ask questions as to why this relationship existed? Who's going to own that? Did someone just make a decision to do that, or do we come to an agreement across multiple people? I think, and I also think the larger your organization becomes, the more people you're throwing at the ontology experience, the more you're going to have alignment and conversations around what do things mean,
yeah. And like,
who
what does
owns the
good
stuff.
enough look like,
Yeah,
basically? So,
I feel like there's a missing part of the product here that needs to be more around like data stewardship and more clearly aligning teams of people to steward the data and a way to funnel questions to them so they can quickly answer them. I don't know what this really looks like. This may be just more of like a process based thing that we have to establish as an organization. But there is this concept of data governance, right? We want to build these data libraries for your organization where they can go find all the information that they need and work with it. But
mhm.
you're going to need this ability to pull back and allow people to question, why does it exist?
Right.
How do we submit questions or things here that can help them? Yeah, this data is correct. Yeah, we can verify it. Here's what we're doing to verify. Here's the proof that verifies what you're asking about these things is in
Right.
fact true. So it's going to be a new world here. I think this is going to be
Well,
exciting. There's a lot of new things coming out.
especially, and the last thing I'm going to say too is we're going to the world too, especially when we're going to rely on not just the conversation, but the automation side of this, right?
True.
Where um, anything you did in Power Automate, I would manually create. But if we are letting an AI agent run with this off my ontology model, and things go horribly awry, and like again, there are a lot of touch points down that road compared to a single person with Power Automate. So a lot of things to consider here on what governance is going to be structured like.
Well, that being said, let's go ahead and wrap it here. Good thoughts and topics around data governance and the ontology. I think you're going to just need to be aware of more conversations will need to be happening. Have a good structure in place. Like if you're already, you don't need an ontology to start talking about data governance, honestly, or stewardship. I think that's a conversation that can be had right now without any ontology for that matter. So I think that's a good thing for organizations to unpack and put together. That being said, Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. Do you have a question, idea, or a topic that you want us to talk about in a future episode? Head over to Power BI tips/podcast. Leave your name and a great question. And finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central, and join the conversation on all Power BI Tips social media channels.
Thank you all for joining. We really appreciate your listenership. You could be doing a lot of other things right now, like actually getting real work done. So go back to work, go figure out your real things, and we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.